The first thing Richard Hale noticed about Station 51 was that nobody stopped moving. Even at 0300 hours, the station lived like a warship at combat alert. Maintenance drones drifted silently through the apparatus bay, scanning equipment with blue laser grids. Autonomous floor cleaners moved between the massive wheels of Engine 51, while logistics drones unloaded fresh medical supplies from a cargo lift overhead. Above it all, Atlas 51 watched. The station AI existed everywhere at once, in the walls, the lights, the vehicles, the rigs. Nothing inside Station 51 truly slept. Richard stood on the second-level observation walkway, overlooking the mech bay below. Technicians moved around 3 EF-72 fireframes suspended in magnetic maintenance cradles, while weld sparks flashed like tiny lightning storms beneath them. The rigs looked almost peaceful, powered down. That illusion vanished the moment they activated. "Can't sleep either?" Richard glanced sideways. Captain Arrron Rourke leaned against the railing beside him, holding a steaming cup of station coffee. The older man looked exhausted, dark circles beneath sharp eyes, but his posture remained straight as reinforced steel. Richard shrugged. "Still adjusting?" Rourke nodded slowly. "Happens to military transfers." Richard smirked faintly. "You get a lot of those?" "No." Rourke sipped his coffee. "Most soldiers don't come looking for redemption." Richard didn't answer that. Below them, one of the EF-72 rigs powered on for diagnostics. White armoured plating shifted while hydraulic systems hummed to life beneath the shell. The machine's optic sensors glowed pale blue. Rourke watched it quietly. "Funny thing about these rigs," he said. "Most civilians think they're machines built for firefighting. They aren't." "No." Rourke looked towards him. "They're machines built to keep humans alive in places humans shouldn't survive." Richard understood that immediately. Combat armor worked the same way, different mission, same principle. A sharp alarm suddenly echoed through the station. Atlas 51's calm voice followed instantly. "Station 51, respond priority Alpha. Residential tower fire with multiple medical casualties. Possible structural instability." Everything changed at once. The station exploded into motion. Firefighters sprinted from dormitories and equipment bays. Medical crews moved toward the response elevators, while drones detached from charging racks overhead like disturbed hornets. Richard followed Captain Rourke towards the apparatus floor. Atlas continued speaking. 43-story residential arcology. Fire suppression systems partially offline. Civilian evacuation incomplete. "Cause?" Rourke asked. "Suspected illegal power tap explosion on sublevel 22. "Of course it is," Heavy 51 roared to life. Beside it, the station's armoured ambulance carrier powered up as medical drones loaded themselves automatically into deployment tubes along the roof. Richard climbed aboard the engine with Ortega and 2 other firefighters, while paramedics loaded trauma gear nearby. One of them caught Richard watching. "You ever work with combat medics?" she asked while locking a medical case into place. "Yeah." She nodded towards the ambulance carrier. "This'll look familiar then." The vehicle doors sealed shut. Sirens erupted. The convoy launched into the sleeping city. Rain streaked across the armoured windshield as Kingsport blurred past in rivers of neon and reflected light. Richard sat in silence, listening to the organised chaos inside the cab. Drone telemetry, building schematics, thermal scans, medical AI predictions. Atlas 51 processed everything simultaneously. "Estimated civilians remaining inside structure 73, Atlas stated. Ortega cursed softly. Captain Rourke's voice came over the comms. "Priority remains evacuation. Medical teams establish triage immediately. Richard, you're with me in the rig." "Copy." The tower came into view minutes later. Flames climbed the side of the massive residential structure like glowing veins. Entire sections of the lower floors burned black while terrified civilians crowded emergency balconies above. Emergency drones already swarmed around the skyscraper. Some projected evacuation arrows against smoke-filled walls. Others scanned for heat signatures. One larger drone hovered near a shattered window, deploying compact fire suppressant charges directly into spreading flames. Richard stepped from the engine as heat slammed into him. It felt almost comforting. That disturbed him a little. "Deploy the rigs," Rourke ordered. 2 EF-72 fireframes descended from magnetic transport cradles attached to the support carrier behind Engine 51. The rigs hit the street hard enough to shake pavement. Hydraulics hissed. Blue optics ignited. Richard climbed into one while Captain Rourke entered the second. The cockpit sealed around him. Immediately his HUD came alive with building schematics and civilian tracking markers supplied by Atlas and the station drones. "Lieutenant Hale synced," the rig AI announced. Outside, paramedics were already establishing triage zones beneath portable shield emitters designed to block falling debris. Richard watched them work while the rig completed synchronization. No panic, no wasted movement. One medic team treated burns while another used autonomous surgical drones to stabilize a civilian crushed beneath debris. Tiny mechanical arms moved with terrifying precision. A child screamed nearby as medics loaded her onto an anti-shock stretcher. The stretcher immediately began administering fluids and monitoring vitals automatically. Richard stared for half a second too long. In the Marines, he had seen systems like that used to preserve soldiers long enough to return them to battle. Here they were used to save civilians. "Richard!" Captain Rourke's voice snapped him back. "Focus! Copy!" The EF-72 moved. The rig smashed through the building's lower security barricades and entered the smoke-filled lobby alongside Rourke's machine. Visibility collapsed instantly. Thermal imaging took over. Orange silhouettes glowed through walls and smoke. "Atlas," Richard said. "Mark trapped civilians." Blue indicators appeared across his visor, 23 life signs above them. The building groaned loudly. "Structural integrity failure progressing," Atlas warned. The rigs advanced deeper inside. Heavy debris blocked the central corridor. Captain Rourke deployed his rig's rescue claws, while Richard activated the magnetic lift array mounted along his forearms. Steel beams rose slowly from the rubble field. Above them, drones flooded through ventilation shafts, carrying compact medical kits and atmospheric sensors. One drone paused beside Richard's cockpit viewport. "Civilian respiratory survival probability decreasing on level 26, Atlas stated through the drone speaker. Richard looked upward. "Then we move faster." The EF-72 sprinted forward. Its armored feet cracked tile flooring while stabilization systems compensated automatically. The building shook violently. Part of the ceiling collapsed ahead. Richard caught the debris instinctively with both arms. The rig strained under the weight. Warning lights flashed across the HUD. Captain Rourke's rig moved beneath the collapse and pulled 2 civilians free from the wreckage. "Nice catch," Rourke muttered over comms. Old instincts returned too easily. Combat reflexes, siege frame muscle memory, except now every movement protected people instead of killing them. That mattered. Richard pushed the debris aside and continued upward through the emergency stairwell. The higher they climbed, the worse conditions became. Heat saturated the walls. Smoke reduced visibility to nearly zero outside thermal overlays. Then Richard heard screaming, level 26. He burst through the stairwell door into chaos. Fire rolled across the ceiling. 3 civilians huddled near shattered windows while an elderly man lay unconscious beside them, and kneeling beside him, a paramedic. Richard recognized her instantly from the ambulance carrier. She looked up as the massive EF-72 entered the room. "Took you long enough," she snapped. Richard almost laughed. "Even here, even now." First responders stayed sarcastic. "What's the situation?" "Patient's coding, smoke inhalation and cardiac arrest." Richard stared. "You came up here alone?" "Drone guided me in before the stairwell collapsed." The medic returned immediately to chest compressions, while 2 medical drones hovered beside her administering oxygen and medication automatically. Richard watched the synchronization between human and machine in stunned silence. The drones handled calculations, dosage monitoring, airway scans. The medic handled judgment, experience, human instinct. Together they moved like one organism. "We need evac now," she shouted. Richard knelt the EF-72 beside the broken wall. "Load them." The rig's rescue platform unfolded from its back compartment, while Captain Rourke's machine stabilized the collapsing floor nearby using anchor spikes. The medic secured the elderly man first, even during collapse, even surrounded by fire. The medics protected the weakest patient first. That stayed with Richard. The civilians loaded aboard the rescue platform while drones projected safe descent routes onto surrounding buildings outside. Richard stepped onto the exterior wall of the tower. Far below, emergency lights painted the streets blue and crimson. The rig began descending. Magnetic stabilization claws dug into the structure with every step. The civilians clung silently to the rescue platform behind him. Halfway down the building, another explosion erupted somewhere below. Flames blasted outward from broken windows. Richard shielded the civilians instinctively with the rig's armoured body. The fire washed over the EF-72 harmlessly, but for one brief second he remembered battlefield dropships burning over colony cities. Bodies, gunfire, screaming. Then the memory vanished beneath another sound. Applause. Crowds below were cheering. Not soldiers, not commanders, civilians, because they were alive. Richard reached the ground level and handed the survivors over to waiting medics. The paramedic from upstairs paused beside him. "You handled the rig pretty well, Marine." "You knew?" She smirked tiredly. "You move like somebody who's been shot at before." Before Richard could answer, another alarm sounded from inside the tower. More trapped civilians. More fire. Captain Rourke's voice came over comms again. "Station 51, move!" Richard turned back toward the burning skyscraper. For years he had believed machines like the EF-72 only existed to wage war. Tonight he watched firefighters, medics, drones and rigs working together to drag people back from death itself. Maybe the Empire built these machines for control. Maybe the military built them for violence. But here at Station 51, they were saving lives. And Richard Hale was beginning to understand that salvation could be its own kind of battle. If you enjoyed this chapter of Ashfall Continuum, please like, subscribe and join us for future missions with Station 51. New chapters, mech action, firefighting operations and sci-fi stories are on the way. Until next time.